I think that Gaston from Beauty and the Beast is actually the hero of the story, and I can prove it. So if you watch the cartoon and you just watch the parts with Gaston and not with the Beauty and the Beast part, he's just a local hero. He's kind of a pompous windbag, but overall, he's there to save the town. He really thought he was the hero of the story. If you watch the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast, they had to add all these other scenes that make him a villain. Because before, he was not. Like, at one point in the new one, he abandons Maurice in the woods to be eaten by wolves. And that's, like, objectively evil. But before, he was excusably not really a villain.
Well, I feel like any villain, if you cut the film right...
Yeah.
Any good villain, if you cut the film right, can look like a hero.
He never really did anything bad. Like, so Maurice runs in and he says there's a beast, and he just like makes fun of him and throws him out. Gets him committed. That's not necessarily evil. He's protecting the well-being of the town from a madman.
Yeah.
You don't even have to recut the film. Like, you just watch the film.
There you go, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about villains that we don't think are actually villains, I think for me, like, Watchmen, both the comic book and the movie and the future TV show, Ozymandias from that he's not a bad guy. Like, he is a utilitarian, and he decided that he would kill 1 million people to save 1 billion people.
That's the most Jake Burton thing I've ever heard.
I love it because it's I love villains that are just so logical, and really, if you look at his logic, his reasoning, the math checks out. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic of philosophies, to the point that it gets so gray that you almost can't even navigate. You lose all of those classical good versus evil. It falls away, and it's just this gray fog of war that I love navigating that gray.
So you could say that the alternate title for Watchmen would just be 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, zinger.
I'm sickened. Yuck. No, Ozymandias, he was right. I really think like Rorschach would have ruined it. And with his journal potentially did ruin peace on Earth. It's so complicated and good.
So I think that brings me to my least villain.
The one you agree with?
The one that I...
Least villain.
Yeah, he's the one who is least mean. Least mean. And that would be Magneto.
Ooh.
I think that he's almost an anti-hero, but depending upon like the situation, he's often portrayed as a villain, even though a lot of what he is fighting to achieve can really be justified for the most part.
Yeah.
So while he may go to extreme measures, a lot of what he seeks to accomplish is really almost noble in a sense.
He's just willing to do more than Xavier was. Because in the comics, I think maybe more than the movies of the X-Men, in case you don't know that Magneto was from the X-Men.
Yeah.
Magneto is just willing to kill and get his way.
Yeah.
Do what it takes to survive.
Take charge.
Wait, Magneto's the guy from Star Wars, right?
Oh, get out. Welcome to Vox Arcana. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
I'm David.
And this is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, episode 10, Villains, Antagonists, and Bad Guys.
So I guess we should start off by defining terms. So what would you guys define a villain as?
So I would define a villain as a character who is both humanized and uses nefarious means to achieve their ideals.
Humanized?
Okay. Yeah, that humanized word, I don't know if I... So then, like, would Sauron from Lord of the Rings not be a villain? Because he's basically an eye the whole time.
I think he's humanized throughout, to an extent.
Yeah, I think through his lieutenants, like Sauron is almost like an embodiment of him, but also through the orcs and through the Uruk-hai, even though you never really see him. So he's kind of a, what would you call that? A metaphysical.
It's almost wouldn't define him.
It's like a satanic one, because like even in like the traditional like biblical Satan, he's not he's not really characterized unless you read like Paradise Lost, where he's characterized exceptionally. So yeah, that humanization is, I don't know.
So
I don't know if that's too specific.
I would almost agree with you, and I would say that he's not a villain. He's an evil entity.
That creates villains beneath him.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Because when you look at those, you know, the orcs that are kind of the leaders, you know, some of them have specific scars and specific markings. You're like, oh yeah, like that's a villain. But like, yeah, they're kind of on the front lines, and they're not the biggest bad, but they're definitely humanized.
So it's almost like Sauron is sin or something like that. Like he's this concept who just begets evil.
And for me,
this metaphysical thing.
Yeah, and almost like a hero, you need to have somebody embodying like an ideal, and you don't see that in Sauron. He's just kind of like the crazy ideal of
what, corruption?
Corruption.
The opposite, yeah.
He's disorder and chaos.
Yeah, and you can see it embodied through the orcs and through everybody that is corrupted by the ring and such.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to D&D for a second, I think that they tend to display good and evil as on one end you have law and order, and then on the other end you have chaos and I don't want to say destruction, but disorder. So it's not like it's necessarily evil, but it is just a lack of order. Let me just go in a big circle.
I would disagree.
Really?
Yeah, because like order, like law and good are not necessarily the same thing. Like you could be chaotic. I mean, the whole alignment chart speaks to those separate axes, you know? So I don't know. I think a villain, I would define a villain much more simply and just be someone or even something. It'd probably be someone or like a creature or a person who is fighting against the protagonists.
Oh, just as simply as that. He's just fighting.
Just very broad. Yes.
Well,
why is that?
Well, I mean, so I hope that our fans have seen Black Panther, because the villain in that film is actually the hero of that film. His name is Killmonger, and arguably Killmonger is a better hero than Black Panther. Fight me.
Oh, I mean, I think he's a good villain, for sure.
I think he forces change in Black Panther, which makes Black Panther a better character in the long run.
They both want to see the success of Wakanda, but they just see that path completely differently.
So getting away from kind of the philosophy of what makes someone a protagonist or an antagonist, which is real murky waters and is really interesting. But how do you guys begin to create your villains? How do you recognize them as different than the party members?
So it's funny, in our world building episode, I talked about building from the ground up. But when I'm building villains, I start, I guess you would say, from the middle down. And that is, you have a state of the world, and you just flow it down to the lowest level that's recognizable and interactive on the part of the players. So the example I would give is, just think of a natural phenomenon, something like, let's say, a drought. And a drought leads to a famine, and so maybe that starts a resource, and then that starts a resource war with a bunch of small city-states. And then one of those city-states comes out on top, and then before you know it, you have somebody with all the food and all the power and all the control over this small area that the players are now interacting with. So it's not even necessarily that this person is evil. Maybe they wheeled and dealed and backstabbed their way to the top of the order, but their significance came out of a situation that's very natural.
Oh, that's so weird that you go the opposite way. Oh, I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't know if I feel like I start building my villains or like creating just like a concept of a villain. Like I start with a concept and then find a way to almost pigeonhole him or her into the world. And I don't know, maybe I will start from the middle down just to see how how the world can affect.
Well, how do you normally do it, Jake?
Villain. How do I normally create a villain? I think of a cool concept, and I'm just like, how do I get this guy in here? Because villains are some of my favorite parts of D&D because I love role playing, and I love role playing as the bad guy. I love hamming it up and being ridiculous and over the top, monologuing and just I want the players, when the villain shows up, they just go, ugh. Like, I want him to just be horrifying and terrifying and annoying and a real threat that they know him or her so well that, I don't know, I love villains so much. So for me, I think of a concept and then I just try to figure out how that would fit in the world. So for example, one of my best villains, I think, was just kind of a businessman. And he basically is kind of like Ozymandias. Like, he's just very utilitarian, thinks about only the greater good, will smash a family of children if it means that, a few more people survive and he'll make a few more bucks. He is just completely brutal, but also mathematical. And I kind of based his concept off of the character in Blade Runner 2049, played by
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto, yeah. And so I just see his character, and he's so right, and he knows what he wants. Like, and then I kind of model even his acting off of him. Like, just, we should have made it to the stars by now. Like, just kind of the whispering, like, oh, it's just so good. And so a lot of times my players will catch me because they'll catch one of my villains and be like, wait, that's basically this from this. And I'll be like, yeah. So I think I start with a concept that I find honestly just fun to role play. And then I figure out how I can be justified to interact with my players as this hammy, over the top villain.
I think those are both like two interesting ways of making villains. Mm-hmm. And I do it a little differently. So Will starts by basing the villains in his world and what would make sense. And then you just take a concept that you really like and just apply it into the world. Mm-hmm. What I like to do is I like to take a character that's almost pre-existing in the world and mold them into a villain based off of how the party interacts.
Oh.
So the villain for me is someone who is meant to be foiled by the heroes. So you look at any good, dynamic, villainous relationship, like Batman and the Joker, it's very yin-yang, where they kind of play off each other and they play off the same ideals. And when I like to make a villain, they kind of represent that same thing, where they take an idea of a group and they kind of push it. And they kind of take it and look at it in a different way, so that they're kind of playing off the ideals of the party, but maybe to a more extreme extent.
Do you have an example?
Okay. So you don't create your villains until you have your players?
No, because I don't... To have a compelling villain, you need to have characters to play off of who have pre-existing goals that they want to achieve.
Oh, so they need to foil kind of the characters' archetypes. Yep. Okay.
And I feel like for me, that makes them more compelling and more interesting, because these people are trying to achieve something that is counter or almost very similar, but in a twisted manner. So it makes them more relatable.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about the past games I've run and the villains I've had, and I'm realizing that I don't really have a main villain in the game or in the story. In general, what I have is a lot of, well, this is probably symptomatic of the fact that my games don't go on for very long, and that I tend to have a more organic story that develops. There's a concept that I just love from a blog called The Alexandrian, and he talks about using natural selection to build your villains. And what that means is you don't have one central villain, you have a whole bunch of people fighting each other, and the players are going to kill them off. If you've ever played certain video games, like Batman Arkham Asylum comes to mind, you'll interact with villains in a cutscene or behind a wall, behind glass, and you can't really kill them. But there's a thing that happens in Dungeons & Dragons where the players can do anything. And so if you are careless, and as a new GM I've done this, you have your villain ride up and say, haha, I defeated you. And then the players just kill that person. And you're like, well, what do I do now? That was my guy. So, so using natural selection is like, well, I have 20 villains or 20 potential villains fighting each other, and you killed one, so now everyone else just sort of moves in and takes their territory, recruits their thugs, whatever. The world goes on. It's very Game of Thrones.
Oh my gosh, that's so different than how I do it. Because what I do is, since my games, this may be a symptom of my games being longer and more, taking place over a much longer period of time with a lot more sessions in the campaigns, I will introduce the villain as fast as I can. And I want this villain to be reoccurring, because I think it's really evident in our culture that nostalgia is really just a very cheap trick to incite enjoyment very quickly.
It works so well.
So when you have a character that shows up, is evil, and then leaves, and then shows up again, the characters are like, oh, wait, that's the guy from before. And they get really excited, and they're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, it's this recurring villain, I feel like, is such an easy way to score, kind of narrative points going forward. And kind of talking about what you said about villains being killed, I have just my sleeve is full of tricks to keep my villains alive. Like, one time, the villain I was talking about earlier, Solomon Maven, who's kind of the businessman archetype, they visited him in his tower, and they were talking to him, and he basically admitted to kidnapping one of their loved ones. And they were like getting really upset, and he was just poking them, just like saying, like, I have complete power over you. There's nothing you can do. And, just really hamming it up. And one of them's like, I can't do this. Like, my character would do this. And he just draws his sword and stabs him. And I'm like, okay. And it just goes right through. Spoilers for The Last Jedi. It goes through just like Kylo's lightsaber. Right?
Sacred texts.
And it's revealed that he's a hologram. And then he says, do you think I'd be stupid enough to leave myself alone, unarmed with you fools? Just something like, so it's like, and then they get even more frustrated because they're like, oh, we don't even know if he's really here. And so, I don't know, I love having the villain show up repeatedly, getting that nostalgia hit, and then them being so evil and so powerful that the characters can't, that they have to deal with the villain's crap. They can't just slit their throat. They have to deal with it.
I find myself wondering if Jake's players are going to listen to this and be like, well, now we have to try to kill the villain every time to see all the tricks you have.
Burn through his bag of tricks.
They're going to realize they never had control.
See, I almost don't like Jake's approach, because I've encountered it in other games where Jake is a very good DM. And
disagree.
No. and the way he runs his game is really, really good. But I've encountered people who do a similar thing, and it comes
it wrong.
Other DMs who have done similar things, and it has come across as extremely cheesy and frustrating to like not be able to kill a villain who is, right there. And it's like, oh, I predicted he was the villain, and I, slit his throat. And then it doesn't do anything. That's kind of frustrating, and it doesn't feel. It takes away from the immersion of the game, which I really value. And I think that you can almost have more interesting consequences and fallout when you do kill a person that big, because there is most certainly a power structure that they are in charge of, and what happens when there's that power vacuum from when they die.
You have to be careful, because people can kill off your villains, and then you find yourself wondering, well, what do I do? We saw this happen in Star Wars in the prequels, which, as much as I love/hate them, there's a lot of lessons you can learn. For instance, Darth Maul was this villain in episode 1, and he was great, or he seems to be great. He wasn't actually, but like since then he's become great. But then he gets killed. In the next movie, you think, who's your villain? Well, now he's replaced by Dooku, and then he gets killed. And then in the third movie, he gets replaced by General Grievous, who then gets killed to make room for Darth Vader. And it seemed kind of short-sighted to me to see. I think Darth Maul should have been a villain the entire way through. That would have been fantastic.
See, and I think that proves my point, because it's like that boost of nostalgia and that like reoccurringness of it makes it fantastic. But To David's point, I think there is kind of a social contract with the players and the DM. Some DMs are just like, this is a free open world, go do whatever you want. There's no plot, there's no anything. But if the players are accepting an overarching plot from the DM, then like I think they will accept some of these cheesy moments or some of these moments that the DM brings up that are obviously plot points or that are obviously like part of the narrative. And that takes a degree of trust, right? Like I feel like you can't go into your average game store and start up a game and as a DM just start throwing out these plot points and have the players listen to your monologues. Absolutely not. But like if you have a group, like a table that trusts you as a DM and your narrative and what you can bring to the table narratively, like I think it can work out, but it is a strange dynamic, and you can't monologue and pull out all the cheese for your plot all the time.
Yeah, so I think also to counter that as well, not to counter it, but to go along with it, I do think that DMs need some sort of flexibility for when they get bested by the players out of sight.
Yeah,
you can't just always have the villain be a hologram, because that gets frustrating and it feels like you have no control. So you do need to, as a DM, be able to let things happen, even if it goes against what your vision for the plot is. You can always seek to improvise and make a greater plot from it.
And I think it's also important to not be so crass as to be like, well, you killed the big villain, but his lieutenant, who looks and sounds and behaves just like him, just takes his place, and essentially you change nothing. Because I think that's boring, and that makes the players feel like they didn't really do anything. So with my technique and with Jake's technique, I feel like these are different sides of a spectrum, and they both can be really fun, but it's going to depend heavily on the group and the people you play with.
Yeah, the bottom line is tailor your game to your group. Don't make your game, don't make your plot, your narrative, your system, whatever. Don't have it so rigid that a group would come in and couldn't break it. Like, allow your players to stretch you as the DM. I think going back to what David said, I think what separates a villain from a DMPC is with the DMPC, you're kind of have an NPC in the party who's just, perfect, and maybe he's got an accent that you're good at, and you just want to keep having this person in the game to feel like you're a part of it as the DM. But the main thing that separates that from a villain is with a villain, you can never forget that you are playing as the inevitable loser. Like, in the end, the villain should, most of the time, lose. And so you have to keep that in mind, no matter how attached you are to your villain. This villain should be defeated.
Yeah.
Or should be banished, or should be whatever, but there should be a sense of winning, a sense of accomplishment from the players over the villain. Always keep that in mind when you're role-playing as a villain, when you're planning out your villains, that this villain is an eventual loser.
That's a really good point to keep in mind. But also important that villains play to win, and they're not going to pull punches or let the players walk over them. There's a concept in creative writing called the idiot ball, and it's a form of bad writing when you have normally intelligent people just behaving unusually dumb because they're holding the idiot ball. And so it would be a huge letdown, I think, to have your villain suddenly just make a huge blunder that's obviously the wrong move and then lose.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the different kinds of villains that GMs can think about when they're building their villain, because they're not all the same, not even close.
Okay, so the main archetype that comes to mind for me is kind of the Voldemort, Sauron, kind of overarching, obviously distant, threat that kind of looms over the whole.
But campaign. they kind of get closer as the story goes on, right? Like, they're going to Mount Doom, which is kind of like where Sauron lives or exists, and then Voldemort also is always getting closer. So I guess it starts off kind of conceptual. Maybe this is a type of villain that's best for a grand sweeping campaign where you hear about him and you see what he's doing over time, the destruction of the land, and eventually you get there and you're like, hey, I know you, but he's never really interacted with you personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, he's definitely not intended to be level 1 straight out of the gate. Like, hey, here you go. Here's your Voldemort. Like, go fight him right now.
Well, actually, Voldemort did try to fight Harry at level 1, and, but he failed.
That's true.
I think another reason these villains, kind of the distant threat archetype, this kind of grand evil, these fit better for longer campaigns and longer arcs because you can introduce them slowly, and like David said, that these guys are like level 25. They're like a cosmic threat. And so because of that, it's going to require some MacGuffin or some crazy strategy in order to defeat them. It's rarely do you walk into their lair and go, all right, roll initiative. Like there's going to be some added stuff to these kind of this archetype of villain.
There's a lot of cool things you can do with this. The one that I like is the marching army. Like there's a horde of White Walkers or zombies.
Orcs.
The same. Orcs or just a rival faction. It could be a disease is spreading. It could be some kind of plague is spreading. Like it's always encroaching and always present, but maybe not immediately present.
Oh, I think the best thing that fits this is the death curse on Cholt from the Tomb of Annihilation. It's like it's something that the players can easily forget about and go do side quests. But then each day when they're losing health, they're reminded that they're like, oh, this is real. This is happening, and we need to address this at some point. And I think that's a perfect example of it because it's distant, it's deep in the jungle, and it's also omnipresent at the same time.
Yeah, but I think it's also important to make players aware of it. Like you're saying, they wake up and they lose a hit point. If you're looking at Harry Potter with Voldemort, J.K. Rowling definitely made this choice to cause interactions between Harry and the villain. Just to make sure you don't forget about them. Yeah. Because if it's too distant, then it's not really a priority. It's important, but it's not urgent. And then you find the players doing every side quest and collecting every bottle in Ocarina of Time that they can get their hands on. And I think that maybe is a little bit of a failure.
For me, with the distant threat types of villains, what I really like to do is kind of have almost like an all roads lead to Rome scenario where no matter what they're doing, they're always constantly reminded of the villain, and they're always kind of on the same path where it's almost that they're destined to eventually fight the villain. So every quest they do will somehow interact with it. Not necessarily every quest, but in general, most quests will have some sort of tie-in.
It's good to have all of your side quests, or if not side quests, just sort of tertiary, less important things kind of hook in. In our previous episodes, we've talked about tone anchors. That's a big thing we like to push, and that is that your NPCs, your world storytelling, your world building even, is kind of pointing in the same direction, and the quests you give can all point back to this one big threat, this one danger, or the situation. If we're talking about that famine from before, you'll see how that impacts people. And maybe some cosmic entity is causing this famine, right? Like it's the anime problem where you go kill the biggest thing in existence, and now you have to go kill the next biggest thing that's even more. And it just keeps going all the way up, turtles all the way down. But it's a good point.
So what are some other archetypes that you guys can think of?
Oh, so this one's good. I like the immediacy of it. I would call this the village bully, or I think in the Pokemon games, there was like a rival that would follow you around and they were always one step ahead.
Oh, yeah.
And this is just anybody who's an up-close threat or danger or antagonist. Like you see, maybe there's a town guard who's corrupt and he's constantly harassing people. And he's low enough level that the players can pretty quickly go and defeat them or subdue them or just kill them because it's D&D and you're probably just going to kill them. It gives you an immediate goal, someone to hate.
Yeah. I think this is a good. I think this is a good repetitive villain that you can keep showing
for sure,
especially from a distance. Especially if you see them like commit an atrocity and then fly off on a dragon. You really don't have a way to interact with them, but it gives you that blast of nostalgia, and you can be like, "Oh, wait, that's that guy. Oh, we got to get this guy." It gives you kind of that mentality, but also I think you kind of mentioned kind of the Pokemon. Professor Oak's son, Gary? Was it Gary?
Gary was Professor Oak, and I think the rival was named Red, or is that the player name? It's been a long time.
Blue? Jeez, we're losing our street cred. But like going back to your kind of Pokemon example, like there's kind of the constant rival that's showing up at the same time, at the same place where you are. I think a fun, not necessarily villain, but they can be villains, is a rival adventuring party.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's super cool to introduce like a group of players and even say their classes.
Mm-hmm. And have just them all be the exact opposite classes.
Or even the same class. Even the same.
Oh, even the same.
So actually, just to side rail you for a second, Jake. In my current game, I made the players meet the previous party from the previous campaign. And they were the same level, class distribution, and I roleplayed them as I would, or as the players roleplaying them.
Oh,
and
that's great.
Yeah, it was just a really quick and easy to remember encounter.
Yeah, I mean, going back to this, okay, I got to tell this story. So when I was in college, we would go around, and it's a pretty big, standard university campus. And so we would go explore all of the old buildings at night because they wouldn't lock a lot of them. So we'd go explore all these kind of old buildings and we'd just have a blast, just kind of urban, adventuring. And so there's probably a group of 5 of us, and we were exploring this building, and we see another group, the same, it's probably 5 or 6 of them too. and there was this moment of us just looking at each other. And it was the weirdest moment. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. It was like tribalism took over, and it was like, okay, this is my tribe and that's another tribe. And it was just so interesting to see how quickly you can kind of become rivals with someone that could be doing the same exact thing as you.
And they didn't even do anything.
Harmlessly. Yeah, they didn't do anything. And so I love that, like, of introducing a group that's the same as the adventuring party. They have the same goals. They're there to just get some gold, do some quests, maybe venture into the big bad's lair. But they're kind of the same alignment, or doing the same thing as the adventuring party, and just see how the adventuring party reacts to that, because a lot of times they'll treat them as hostile.
Yeah.
I think there was an episode of Arthur where they met a group of people who were just like the off-brand versions of themselves.
Are we talking about the greatest animated television show of all time?
We are.
Arthur.
And I remember going back, I don't know how, it must have been on VHS or something, but I paused it and I looked at their group who were just similar animals, but like they had square versions of things that were normally round, or their clothes were just like swapped. And that's exactly what I would do for a rival party. I would also make one of the rivals in that party fall in love with somebody in the other group. I've done that before.
Ooh.
That way everybody else hates each other, but then there's like this forbidden love that just, is a undercurrent.
I think you should have one of the guys as kind of the leader of the group who might be a little antagonistic towards your party of adventurers. And then, having also another one who's kind of Romeo and Julieting the situation.
Yeah, I love having the mirror or like yin yang type dynamic villains, or just even foils. For the party, because they're so relatable. They're so familiar, and yet there's that competitive tribalism rivalry that makes so much sense. One of the things I'd like to do is when you have a character who has like a brother, and the brother they'll have the same growing up experience,
DNA.
Yeah, the same similar DNA, and then one of them's evil, and then you get to see how in one case normally the party member of your group has turned their situation into a motivating factor for them to be good, and the other has twisted it. Almost like in Black Panther, even though they're not brothers, they both, They kind of are brothers.
They were like cousins or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they have similar goals.
Yeah, they have similar goals.
Different ways of achieving them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like that kind of dynamic.
So I think tying this into alignment, so having the foil, David, you talked about earlier not making your villain until you have a party. And I think that works well in the way as you see how your players act, and then you can create a villain that is the opposite of them. Not necessarily on the good evil spectrum, but just on, if you have a party of a bunch of paladins and clerics and just a very lawful party, then you can introduce a chaotic villain. That may not necessarily be evil, but will foil them, because it will be a mirror. It'll be a different way of ethically viewing their world. And another thing that I change about alignment is I add a third axis for alignment.
Whoa.
We have like an alignment cube.
So it's 3 dimensions.
Yeah. So, and the third dimension I add is cynical, neutral, idealistic. And that changes the alignment chart completely because it adds that whole other layer to it. Going back to what you were saying, David, your favorite or the villain you most agree with is Magneto. And I would say the biggest difference between Magneto and Professor X isn't good or evil. It's one is idealistic and one is cynical. And that completely changes it.
That's so good. I'm gonna find a way to illustrate this 3D alignment chart, Jake. That sounds great. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, because
it adds a layer that's so necessary. I think
Xavier has that optimism it's just so hopeful in humanity, and Magneto's just cynical. He is very cynical. Very
and you could think of like someone who is a idealistic lawful good and someone who is a cynical lawful good. And those characters are completely different despite being the exact same alignment using the traditional scale. Wow. The traditional spectrum.
Yeah. I feel like the cynical spectrum defines almost all anti-heroes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look at any anti-hero, they're so cynical and jaded towards the ideals of most heroes that they encounter. I'm thinking of Punisher. He's very cynical, very, very depressed outlook.
Well, he's like chaotic good, but cynical.
He's very cynical.
I mean, I compare it oftentimes because I love the Civil War comic books. I don't like the movies so much because they neglect all of the philosophy. But for an example, Captain America and Iron Man split, and Iron Man kind of has more of the utilitarian, almost kind of more cynical group, the more lawful group, and where Captain America has the more chaotic group, the more idealistic group. And it's really interesting because Captain America has his team. They're kind of undercover, and Punisher shows up, and Punisher immediately kills someone in the war room.
Whoa.
And Cap is like, what are you doing? And like pins him up against the wall. He's like, what are you? And Punisher's like, that guy was bad. And it's really interesting to see kind of the different alignment split up. It's like, okay, Punisher is cynical, where Cap is idealistic, and Cap is like, no, this villain can do some good, whereas Punisher's like, no, he's gotta die right here. And so I think that extra alignment flavor really, I think it adds another dimension that's needed.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It adds that extra little flavor to your flav.
Flavor to your flav.
All right, leaving Flavor Town for a second. What's another archetype?
The final one that comes to mind for me is what I call the hunter or the chaser. Think about anybody who is pursuing you, like a bounty hunter, or if you've seen the original Jumanji film, Van Pelt was constantly hunting Robin Williams' character. Or the Predators in the Predator movies. It's just this even more immediate than the village bully archetype. The hunter is at your heels, and you would use this if you want the players to move. They don't have time to wait.
That's a good way to introduce a villain that kind of reinforces the tone by making it kind of more scary
and like, urgent.
Urgent, because that doesn't this kind of predator pursuing type villain doesn't really make sense in a lot of more heartfelt or silly games. But it really makes the tone more urgent and scary and makes people maybe pay attention a little more.
Imagine if you had a whole campaign where the main villains were all hunting the players. And so no matter where you go, maybe you could have
they're always
like a jungle adventure or something. That's interesting because it kind of changes the dynamic, because with the evil overlord type threat thing, the players are moving toward that. But with the hunter, the players are trying to move away from that.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That does change it.
One of the problems that I have with the Chaser, even though I think it's a really good way of pressuring players and making them feel this sense of anxiety, one of the problems is it can be easy to take away the humanizing or compelling aspects of the villain, whereas because they're just a threat that's always there, they're always fighting, and you don't necessarily find out why or what the purpose of it is.
I think you could find out the purpose. Mm-hmm. So if I was to use a Chaser, I would probably really step off on the urgency, because you don't want every scene to be like, oh, and in the distance you see on the rooftop, the sniper perched aiming at you, because I think that would get really boring or tiresome. But if you had this reoccurring group of people, like maybe you combine two of them, but you have this constant threat. It doesn't have to be quite as extreme as we're making it sound.
Yeah. So one of the ways that I like including the Chaser kind of villain archetype is when you have some sort of ban in the country or in your world where, let's say, magic is banned. You'll see that the way that the characters interact with the world is different because some like king or dictator fears power from other people. And I feel like that's a great way of kind of including that type of Chaser where the threat isn't just one person, but it's a whole kingdom where it's suppressing the characters and what they can do.
There's probably more archetypes that we could talk about, and I'm sure I'm going to think of 5 more as soon as we stop recording, but I'm thinking now just what makes a great villain?
Oh, man.
Just from pop culture, like what comes to mind?
Going along with what David said earlier is like the humanization. And like I've heard it a bunch of places, like a bad villain is wrong, a good villain thinks he's right, and a great villain is right.
Yes.
And it's like it's so, and like maybe their truth is hard to swallow, or maybe it's a bridge too far, or maybe it's too brutal or extreme, but in the end, like they have a hint of being ethical or being correct, like having a good point.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think of, Magneto obviously comes to mind.
Yeah, really
with
strong.
his mutants not being able to coexist with humans. In the end, that's kind of a good point, and it's like that cynical but true statement almost.
So I'm trying to think of villains that actually are right. Definitely the Emperor from Star Wars comes to mind.
Wait, what?
The Empire did nothing wrong.
Oh my god, please tell me you're lying.
You think about, he brought so much stability to the Outer Rim, and especially to the Inner Rim. The economy was thriving. The council was dissolved, with applause, no doubt, no less. Jar Jar Binks was finally put where he okay.
But what about democracy?
No, so actually, Jake, I am having trouble thinking of villains that are really relatable in the sense that they were right, aside from Black Panther. But
Ozymandias?
Yeah, I think of Ozzy. Like to me, with my kind of very specific ethical, utilitarian, maximize pleasure, minimize pain worldview, I think, he's totally right. Yeah, well, it's like utilitarian hedonism. It's just like, yeah.
Well, I know I can think about my favorite villains just from movies and TV. The first one that comes to mind is Syndrome from The Incredibles.
Oh, he's good.
Just because he wanted to be a hero, and he did all this stuff to get there, but he became the villain. And I think that's just so tragic.
Yeah, because it's like his ideals should be at the forefront as like a heroic motive, because when you look at the movie and its themes, they're kind of confusing, because the themes are really kind of this weird kind of royal blood philosophy of just some people are better than others, and the outside world should stop putting down these people who are just better than you.
Whoa, that's what you got out of that?
I mean, that is one way to read it. I don't think that's the main theme by any means, but it does kind of convey that a little bit. And Syndrome is the opposite of that. He's like, I have the tech to make everyone super. Mm-hmm. And it's like that equality of everyone's super and then nobody one is. It's like, that's good though, but everyone's super. And I don't know. It's such, I think he's right. And I think the main thing with Syndrome is he made a few missteps. Mm-hmm. And he should have made the touchpad thing on his wrist.
Oh, the 0-point energy beam?
But what the thing that controlled the robot that Dash yells?
The remote controls the robot!
The remote controls the robot.
Yeah.
Syndrome's remote.
Like, honestly, Syndrome made a few missteps, and one of them was not installing the remote properly so it wouldn't be knocked off.
Wait, does the entire plot of The Incredibles hinge on that one moment where he loses his bracer?
Well, how would the movie go if Syndrome was knocked out, but he still had the control on him? So when he came to, he was still in control.
You'll have to ask Brad Bird, or watch The Incredibles 2 coming this summer. If we were to summarize Syndrome, I think he was kind of a misguided, aspirational hero who's just went really wrong. And you could take that just completely and put it in D&D, where you have a person who wants to be this grand wizard, or insert class here, and they trained and they did everything, but they just fall in with the wrong crowd, or they make a few wrong choices. And next thing you know, you're a necromancer living in a cave with a bunch of undead guys trying to take over the world. Could happen to anybody.
Yep. Happened to me
I
once.
love that.
Happened to me once.
So what do you guys think about Disney villains? Like, are Disney villains, are they good or terrible?
I think they work as much as they need to. On a basic level, they, I guess the answer is yes to that question. So as I mentioned before, Gaston was not a villain. He was misunderstood. Hashtag save Gaston. But I also think that Jafar you might be able to make the argument for Jafar from Aladdin as being...
What?
Well, if you look at the leadership of Agrabah, the Sultan was absolutely unqualified to lead.
What?
I mean, sometimes it's better to have a strong, slightly evil ruler than it is to have a weak, very kindly ruler.
Disney villains, to me, I remember them because they're forgettable, if that makes sense. No, I don't remember them.
What about
Scar.
Oh, Scar. Yeah.
Dude,
Scar was good.
Long live Mufasa.
Sid from Toy Story.
Oh.
See, that's interesting.
I don't think he's a villain.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think that Sid is interesting because he's not necessarily an evil person. He's just kind of a troublemaking little kid.
Yeah.
And but from the perspective of the toys, he is literally the most terrifying person.
But the toys don't reveal their sentience to him. Like, when they do, he freaks out. Like, like, I don't know. If Sid is a villain, then cuff me, boys. I'm a villain too.
Well, I think we've all burned our fair share of Barbies with magnifying glasses.
I know I definitely have.
But my point is that maybe anybody, or at least things can be villains that you might not normally expect to be villains. There's an RPG called Mouse Guard, where instead of playing as human heroes, you play as tiny little mice, and you're crossing streams in the woods that are, like an inch wide, but for a mouse, it's much more dramatic. And they have villains that are things like a hawk, or just any bigger creature. In A Bug's Life, a grasshopper was a pretty terrifying villain for an ant.
Oh, he was a great villain.
And it was voiced by, what's his name?
Kevin Spacey.
It was voiced by Kevin Spacey, who actually turned out to be a villain in real life. So it was just typecasting. Who's the villain of Monsters, Inc.?
There's the lizard dude. I forget his name.
So, okay.
Then there's the crab guy who was just trying to make money.
We could almost write this whole episode and just examining Pixar villains to see what they do, because I think the storytelling is just top notch in Pixar. Unless you're talking about unless the word Cars appears in the title.
Yikes!
So moving away from Disney, because I think Disney makes things more PG rated, which can harm a villain immensely.
Well, they paint in broad strokes because it has to be really quick and digestible for a kid. Like they're not going
And
to show
I think
a village
yeah, but
burning.
that's the point. If you can't show that, if like most real world villains or most of the best villains can't be shown to children.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think that's the problem. I mean, with Disney, a lot of times is they Disneyfy villains and make them more PG. And because if you look at Ultron from Avengers Age of Ultron, he is a villain that is very charismatic, has some interesting, really cool monologues, does some really, really immense damage to the heroes. But at his core, he's not scary because he's not, in my opinion, violent enough. Like him walking through a subway car that's filled with people and Cap is in front of him and he's just walking towards them. It's like, for me, I want to see a villain just terrorize. Like, imagine if Ultron, and Disney would never allow this, but imagine if Ultron just picked up a person and crushed their head.
Oof.
In front of Cap. Immediately, Cap is like, oh my god. Like, it will mess with him. And I think a real villain would want to do that, would want to cause psychological harm to the heroes.
Well, within reason to how the villain would behave. And I think for Ultron, he probably should have done that because that seems to be in line with his ability to manipulate the heroes psychologically.
Yeah.
And so, like in that example, it seems really strange. Like you wouldn't have... let's go back to Syndrome. Like you wouldn't have Syndrome like breaking somebody's back or something, or ripping somebody in half. But I mean, in my Incredibles fan fiction, that does happen a few times. But yeah, you're right. I think that the PG ratedness tends to make it. Well, okay. So actually, I might disagree with you a little bit because I think the ability to communicate a villain quickly and efficiently to anybody is a skill. So making us not like what's another Disney villain, like Scar, right? Even though Scar does kill Mufasa, the kids' way, right? Like the kids understand that he kills someone, and we don't see blood and we don't see brains. Thank goodness, because then that would be a different film. In my fan fiction, though, you do see blood and brains. The same joke. All right.
Fooled him again.
But you understand that he's bad. And maybe that's all you have to do. And in D&D, you might not have a lot of time to have a monologue and have them demonstrate how terrifying they are. And
okay, I have a lot to say about this. I think in D&D, most of the time, and I want to say if your table is different, if you're playing with children, if you're playing with people who are have a lower constitution than the other players, you might want to avoid this type of villain. But for me, if you want to establish a villain, immediately have them kill someone. Just show up and kill someone. In one of our campaigns, there was a train that they were on. And there was kind of this train robbery scene, and there was these hobgoblins that were running and kind of invading the train. And so they're trying to fight off these hobgoblins without harming any civilians. And the hobgoblin chief is trying to get in their heads, and he's just picking up people and throwing them off the train.
oh my gosh.
And it immediately takes the villain up a level. So I think having violence, especially even having a villain murder a very beloved NPC, is an immediate way to establish them as a villain, establish them as a character that is willing to do things that others aren't, and makes them scary. I think a good example of this is Negan in The Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah.
He shows up and kills a main character, two main characters, and he does that because he's showing he has complete power over this group of people. And in that, every time Negan shows up, from then on out, you're scared. I don't know, I haven't been caught up with the TV show, I've heard it goes downhill, but with the comics, whenever Negan shows up, your heart starts beating a little faster, because when he's in a panel, anyone can die.
Yeah.
And that fear makes villains better, right? If you have this cartoonish villain, people aren't scared of them. They're going to do things, like you said, Will, they're going to try to kill him. But like, if a Negan type villain shows up and kills someone and has everyone pinned down, like the players aren't going to, smart players, aren't going to try to fight that because they know they'll be cut down immediately. So I think power being shown through violence is oftentimes guttural and brutal, but effective.
So I have 2 points that I want to make. Number one is you don't have to be super graphic about it in order to come across this way. I know that some people get uneasy at the fact that of death and things like that, but you don't have to make it R-rated and describe every single piece of brain matter flying out of their skull as it's being bashed.
Okay, David. Tone it down.
But and also you don't necessarily just want to have violence for the sake of violence. It should always serve a purpose. I think that Negan is a great example because it is violence done right, and that he is, number one, he, as you said, he's showing his power over the group, and number two, he's doing it because he wants to. It reveals like his character. It reveals like who he is, and it kind of makes sense for him to do it in order to gain the fear that he needs. Yeah, the submission in order to control this group of people. So it makes sense, but it is evil. But it's not just for like random killing sake, which is where some villains can go wrong and they become too much like the Joker, where it's just pure chaos. It doesn't make sense.
So, okay, going along with that, like what are some things to avoid with villains? Like what are some examples of bad, just plain bad villains?
Mr. Freeze from Batman Forever, I think. Or is it Batman and Robin?
Disagree, though.
For those who don't know, in the 90s, Arnold Schwarzenegger appeared as Mr. Freeze in one of the worst films. But also, like, one of the fascinatingly, like, interesting films to watch just for all of the decisions they made. I think Bane is also in that film as just, like, a voiceless mook. Oh. He follows around Poison Ivy and just, like, kicks stuff. It's ridiculous. But Mr. Freeze, he just has cheesy lines. He's not really evil because they had to keep the rating down and just because that movie is gonzo madness. But he just always has a one-liner, a cheesy, freezy one-liner.
I think it fits the tone, though. I think that's the importance of fitting the villain to the tone of your story.
True. Very true. And he's perfect for the film.
That type of villain.
But he's not a good villain.
No. He's good for that movie. But he's bad.
Yeah, he's good for the movie, bad for the... bad as a villain.
I don't know. I think philosophically you can... If you have a ridiculous story, then your villain can be equally as ridiculous.
I guess the question is it possible for a competent writer to have written a better but also ridiculous villain than Mr. Freeze?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, then we got to move him to the great villain category. But I urge you to go watch that film, Jake, because I think it'll change your mind. Because that movie's just
I love that film.
Trash.
Oh my god.
Under my definition of a villain, I feel like he doesn't really fit because he's not really fighting for some sort of extreme ideal because you don't see
he's
it
not nefarious.
Just causing trouble.
Yeah, he's just kind of like a troublemaker.
I don't know.
If you look at Mr. Freeze in the actual Batman comics and the animated series, he's a great villain.
Yeah,
because he has this really unique motivation
his
to save his wife.
Is
until DC rebooted the universe and removed his motivation for some reason.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the new Mr. Freeze in the New 52, they removed Nora Freeze, so he's just kind of a terrorist, an eco-terrorist. But I thought that was such a misstep. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, because that's a pretty good. Well, so what are some other bad ones? Just horrible.
Dr. Robotnik from Sonic the Hedgehog. Oh my gosh.
I don't even think of him.
Does he even count as a villain, or is he technically a hero? You can probably play as him in some games.
Oh my gosh, he's just...
He is a 90s video game villain where all he has to do is be a boss fight every few levels. And he has no real development. I don't know. I think the Sonic community is going to come after me for saying this, but I don't think Dr. Robotnik's a good villain.
They're violent. They'll come after you.
They're going to spin dash it into me.
Well, I think going along with Robotnik is Bowser. I think if you're playing tennis against your worst enemy, then he's not your worst enemy.
Yeah, you're right. Bowser's equally bad, at least as bad as Robotnik, because he just does the same thing over and over. But it's almost like a joke now. Like, even in the Mario universe, it's just...
Like, it's the point.
Yeah. It's just a very, very simple idea. Like, you have to go rescue the princess. This is the same villain that's been around since 1986. Go get him.
And I guess it's not about the villain at all.
That's
No.
true. Mario's
Like-
not telling
like
a
Bowser-
compelling story.
Bowser could be King Boo, and nothing would change.
Yeah.
So I think that goes to, that goes back into D&D, because it's like, at what point should the villain make the story? Or at what point should there not necessarily have to be a villain at all?
Well, if you're talking about the original D&D, as the game was written by Mr. Gygax himself, and you were just crawling around in a dungeon, killing random monsters and getting their stuff, I don't think you really needed an overarching villain. You don't worry about political plots or famines or fatigue or whatever. You just care about what you're doing, and that's the thing that's in front of you.
Hack and slash and
Yeah.
thrash.
So in that kind of hack and slash game, like, if the villain doesn't matter, I don't know. Does that change D&D? Does D&D change? Not necessarily going from 1st edition to 5th, but like, does it change with a villain absent?
Well, I guess that depends on how you define a villain.
Yeah.
But let's say you're doing an open world hex crawl thing, and the players kind of go where they want, and they explore. And maybe you have localized villains or threats or situations or whatever. I don't know. I think it would be a different kind of game.
I think it changes the story. So if you're playing a D&D setting or campaign and there's an overarching story, you're going to have to play it out differently. I feel like from the way we play, or at least me and Jake, it's a lot of heroes and villains. Kind of like the comic booky. You have your good guys and your bad guys, and there's some sort of there is like gray area and stuff still that they're fighting in between, but for the most part it's just a battle of ideals, whereas in like what Will's talking about, it's more just characters in rough situations and them fighting the situations.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it does, like, without villains, I would be without another thing that I love to do as a DM, which is roleplay as evil people. And if I lost that, I don't know, it turns into a game that I can run, but I would be less willing to, that I would be less excited about running.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to mention here was the idea of what I'm calling Breaking Bad or Burn Notice style villains. And so if you haven't watched either show, all you have to know is that it's this kind of down on the ground, dirty, maybe drug cartel or
realistic.
Or at least as realistic as I care to.
A TV show, yeah.
Yeah. And they have what I would just call a villain web, and that is you have all these different little guys kind of fighting each other, and in Burn Notice you'll have a villain who or a villain of the week, whatever, some drug dealer, some mafia guy, and they defeat him or they disable his business, whatever, and then a few episodes or even a few seasons later, the same guy comes back and asks for help from the characters. And so you see this constant interaction of a reusing of the same characters over and over. I see this a lot in the Star Wars Fantasy Flight role-playing game, where you just have this web of maybe not even villains, but this web of characters who just you constantly harvest and reuse. And Breaking Bad does the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think going back to what I said about like just adding nostalgia to the game really easily is if you look at a character, like you're making a new NPC. Like I think the question you should ask is, can I make this an NPC from earlier?
Yeah.
Or can I even make this villain an NPC from earlier? I think something that I've found out is when I have a more open world game, my players will naturally do more risky things, and they will really not know what's a side quest or the main plot, if there even is a plot. And so they'll do things like maybe wrong a bartender or even kill a bartender's daughter on accident. So, something like that.
On accident.
You can bring, or maybe just something like that, cause a bar fight and the bar ends up burning to the ground. Then that bartender can become a villain, maybe just a minor villain, but using villains as punishment for past player actions is something I think is really effective. Like if they go on this murder hobo-y spree, punish them. Like have people coming after them, have people angered at their actions.
The
and
entire
make
city guard
villains.
comes marching after them days later.
Oh man, I love the idea of when you have a group of murder hobos, you just throw a bunch of heroes at them. Until they
just to show them, just as a mirror almost. Just like look at yourselves. Oh god.
Yeah.
Look at the trail of blood in your wake.
And
You're the villains.
So and eventually it will either push them to being good, or it will push them to even further extreme.
Yeah.
Wow. Turns
That's
out they
super
were the
interesting.
villains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens.
We found the enemy, and it is us.
Oh.
For your villains, is redemption possible? Have you ever redeemed a villain in one of your games?
I don't think so.
I haven't used it, but I want to. I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think I've done it once, and I think it's good to do this with players that are kind of on the fringes. It doesn't really work with kind of the distant threat, kind of the evil overlord, Voldemort, Sauron type villain. But it works really good with kind of NPCs that turned bad, or certain types of villains that are on the edge. Maybe made a few wrong choices, and their redemption could be a big plot point, or it could save the players in a time of need. Something like that, I feel like, has immense narrative payoff.
Yeah, like a relative or a friend that has just gone off the path, and you want to try to bring them back.
I think it can be really good. So using the Dungeon Master's Guide, I want to challenge each other and try to give the worst from the tables in the book. I want to try to find the worst things, and then someone else will have to try to make them to make that villain work.
Wait, so if you're following along at home, we're on page 94 of the DMG. These tables allow you to roll up a villain's scheme, a villain's methods, and a villain's weakness.
Nice.
This is hard.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so this is what I rolled. So revenge. So you want to avenge a past humiliation or insult.
Oh no.
And your method is vice. and you got seduction.
What? No.
Oh, I can easily do this right now. Right now, this is easy. All right. So,
And their weakness is the presence of a particular artifact.
okay. So this is the villain here would be a bard. So
Okay.
the bard somehow in their past had a performance that just went horrible, and now their whole goal in life is to seek to manipulate people through their music, and they're charming people through the songs that they play in order to gain control.
Seduction?
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait, so let me just get in there, David.
Yeah. Go. You can make.
So what if he's specifically targeting nobles, like female nobles,
Ooh.
and he charms and seduces them to get some power behind the throne? Maybe he's even getting them alone and then killing them, like he's a little assassin or something. It's interesting, and that kind of villain is almost behind the scenes, where you'd be hearing rumors that these noble, like princesses or duchesses, are just disappearing or being killed,
being kidnapped.
Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things, and you later find out that it's this bard, this scorned bard.
Yeah. Ooh,
And this
maybe it
bard
was
has to
scorned
be
by an
someone you've
ex-lover.
interacted with before.
Of course, it would have to be.
Yeah.
I love that. So their weakness, how does that come in? They are weakened by the presence of a particular artifact.
Maybe their magical instrument has a sibling, like a twin instrument or artifact that just negates the magical abilities of that thing.
Oh, I'm seeing that, like just this super charismatic, seductive bard, and then like him realizing his charm isn't working anymore.
Wait, so
Just be like,
but you
oh,
have
no.
to play it to get the magic to work. So you have to have literally like a guitar battle
Yeah.
to defeat him.
This is just the devil went down to Georgia scenario.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic DWTG. No, sorry. All right, let me roll up your
What's
challenge,
another one?
Jake. So your scheme for your villain is going to be... All right, your villain scheme is to ascend to godhood.
Oh,
The villain's methods are going to be a breach of contract, just to make it hard on you. And
breach.
yeah,
contract.
and then your villain's weakness is a special weapon that deals extra damage when used against the villain. So good luck with that. He's like a tax collector.
Oh man. Okay. No. So a breach of contract. I mean, that's my method. I feel like this villain is a satanic figure. Like this is Lucifer.
Oh, he's
this
like dealing
kind
with demons and stuff.
He's like a demigod that, like, yeah, maybe reigns in a circle of hell, or maybe even is a good, not necessarily good, or maybe a lawful angel type that kills the demigod in front of him.
What?
You know, he breaches his contract.
I'm picturing Ursula, who like makes a paper appear and she has people sign it, and she like binds people with this stuff, and then she puts them in situations where they have to break it, so she gets her way.
See, I guess that could work. I was thinking more of like a Lucifer overthrowing and then becoming way more powerful than he has any right to be, trying to be immortal. Because I'm struggling to get how someone breaching contracts would make me as a villain more immortal.
I don't know.
So it would probably be a more satanic figure. But yeah, the use of contracts, I don't think I've ever done this with players, but I feel like that'd be amazing to literally make them sign a contract. Or like have them do a literal deal with the devil, to see how they would change their behavior, or if they would breach it immediately, or if they would treat that contract as valid because they're dealing with a demonic entity. Like that's really interesting. And so okay, so he'd be kind of a satanic figure. He's trying to ascend to godhood by betraying his contract with his bosses all the way up the line. So he's very ambitious. So what is the weakness again?
A magic weapon.
Magic weapon.
Ooh, okay. So there'd be an old contract, and I'd have to slowly work this into the lore. But basically it'd be if this villain broke the contract, then the person who he broke the contract with, their weapon would be imbued with magic that could kill him instantly.
Oh yeah, okay.
And so because of that, maybe that person doesn't even remember making this deal. Maybe this person is an NPC that doesn't want to get involved. Or maybe this NPC died years ago.
Yeah, this could be the relative of one of the players, and they have a quote-unquote magic sword, but it's only magical and effective against this exact one creature.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like a family heirloom that's been passed down.
Yeah,
but
it's like a plus 10 against this one guy.
Yeah.
I mean, or if you wanted to make the quest line longer, you could make it some character that made a deal with this devil a long time ago and then died, and you have to go dig in some tomb, dungeon to find that sword.
That's perfect.
Because they didn't even think it was valuable.
Yeah, nobody would steal that. It's just like a crappy
because they didn't know this demon went against the contract.
Yeah, the demon knew that he could break the contract because the guy's dead. Who cares? And nobody's going to know about this sword. Oh, okay. So this is why I love random tables, because it's gotten us to think way outside where we normally would go with creating villains. And we've arrived at
because it sounds so hard. What we roll is like, that's impossible.
Yeah, but then here we are with a pretty decent plot line for the game.
Yeah.
Let's do another one. Passion. Prolong the life of a loved one.
Oh, sounding like Mr. Freeze.
That's good.
All right. And then we are going to do politics genocide.
Oh, whoa!
Oh my god! That's under politics and not murder.
Yeah,
yeah. For methods, it's genocide, and then their weakness will be.
He's really trying to.
He's trying to trip us up here, Jake.
The villain is destroyed if it speaks its true name.
Oh, okay. That sounds like some kind of lich or something. So I already have some ideas.
Let's hear them.
So in the universe, you'd have to make resurrection magic be extremely inefficient. Where if you're doing a genocide to save the life or prolong the life of one person, then it's got to be a return of like 1,000 to 1 or more.
Oh yeah.
So you're trading life for life, which is just brutal and very selfish. So maybe these would be lovers who've been alive for a long time. So maybe he's prolonging his life and hers.
Oh yeah.
But to do that, he's wiping out everything. So maybe this guy has already wiped out every goblin tribe in this huge area, and now he's wiped out all of the XYZ creatures, races, and he's moving on to now bigger targets.
Oh, and these things are joining his army, his necrotic, undead army.
Jeez. Okay.
I love that.
Easy.
And so what was?
All right. Oh, whoa,
okay,
whoa.
Okay.
You got the weakness.
His true name.
So how does he get a weakness of his true name being
okay? I got
to
this. I got this. Okay. So he's trying to keep his loved one alive. I'm going to say it's his wife. He's trying to keep, he just can't stand, he can't bear the idea of losing her. Basically, somehow you get the heroes to interact with her while this lich has distracted her away. And this wife talks to them and she's just a normal woman and doesn't know that her husband is doing all this to keep her alive.
Oh no, he was lost at sea or something and she's unaware that he exists still.
Yeah. And so she has to basically, part of the plot becomes convincing her to either tell you that Lich King's true name or for her to talk to her husband herself for the first time in like
and she says
while.
his name
and
he
she
remembers
says his
who
name
he
and somehow
is.
There's some curse that if he's ever, heard his name again that it would kill him. But like part of the plot is that social interaction of talking to his wife, who's a normal woman, who's not this evil half undead woman herself, but she's just a normal woman who doesn't know what's going on.
Wow. And that's nice and tragic, which is memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good. You could probably write a little short story about this.
Yeah.
Well, that's been Random Tables, everyone. Highly recommended. Roll on them every day.
Yeah.
It's good for your brain.
That should be a segment. We should have just a Random Tables segment.
I agree.
Have them roll on in. We could have the dice rolling sound.
Roll on in.
Roll on into the Random Tables segment.
All right, that might be a recurring segment. So let's open the question vault.
Welcome to the Question Vault, the part of the show where we answer your questions. If you have a burning question for us, email it over to voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. This week's question is, what were your favorite villains in your games and why?
Ooh, okay. So I think for me, my kind of Neander Wallace, the Blade Runner 2049 villain character, Solomon Maven, he's up there, kind of the businessman. Like, just my players loathe him. So he's up there. I think another one is Zanzidar, my Rakshasa character that has died and been reborn several times, always hating the party for one reason or another from past lives. He's been super compelling and, just again, a good hit of nostalgia whenever he shows up. But I think my favorite, I just introduced him. We're going through the Tomb of Annihilation campaign, and he shows up with kind of a rogue army from the mainland, and he's kind of this Christopher Columbus figure who lands and names Port Nianzaru and Chult for himself. Ooh. Like he claims it like as he's gonna rule it as an emperor. And so he's just got this real kind of pompous demeanor, and he's just this kind of conquistador. His name is Dorian Blackfield, and he's just this perfect villain that just fills the role perfectly. So I don't know, villains are such a big part of my games that like I have so many to choose from. I love all my villains deeply.
I actually hate all of my villains. I'm not even joking. Like, so let me explain. So a lot of the campaigns that I start, I never finish just because there's people, have schedules that get changed.
Sorry, David. I'm sorry.
And things happen. Sometimes your car gets broken into and all of your D&D notes are taken, so you have to start from scratch. So, random things like that. So a lot of the villains that I've prepped just never get used, and it feels bad. So I hate them because of that. But one of the
villains do to you?
One of the villains that's not really a villain is I like the dungeons that I've made. And dungeons almost take on a sentience of themselves. So
yeah.
they have, their own, the nature of what the building or the tomb, whatever it is. And I feel like some of the dungeons I've made I've been pretty happy with.
All right, Will, what's your favorite villain?
So I'm thinking back, and in my actual D&D games, my villains are more low level in the sense of, we call it the village bully. Just small potatoes, let's say. But I have played a lot more games that are not necessarily D&D. So my favorite villains are from the Star Wars campaign that I ran, actually pretty substantially long.
Ooh.
Yeah, and but I'm trying to think here about, because I don't remember their names, but I remember what they did. And the Empire is just such a good villain because it is both a distant threat that's just a constant problem, but then it scales really well into this local problem, whether that's TSA or whatever the Empire equivalent is, like just traveling and having security. There was one, I think her name was Prule. It was like Lieutenant Prule. Just this really grotesque, lackadaisical, I guess. It was a Imperial Watch post out in the middle of nowhere, and they'd really let their discipline slip a lot, and a lot of that was because of this commander. And
wait, was this the game that I played?
Mikey Warren played it with us. I don't know if you did.
Oh, okay.
It might have been the same campaign.
I remember that. I think
it
that
was
was
the same
great.
one.
Yeah, people
It was
came
so
in and
much
out,
fun.
and she didn't really do anything other than like live on the station and like collect bribes and just facilitate smuggling because it's how she made a lot of money. So she was just this nasty, but also really powerful presence in the game.
Oh yeah, because Star Wars can create some really memorable villains, definitely.
Yeah, that game is just terrific.
Like Darth Plagueis the Wise.
I haven't actually heard the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Oh, really?
It's not something a Jedi would tell you.
Not from a Jedi. Okay, now that we've proven that we have seen Star Wars, let's...
Yeah. And we enjoy prequel memes.
Who doesn't enjoy prequel memes? Thanks for listening to Vox Arcana Episode 10. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
And I'm David.
We'll see you next time. We're on Twitter at Vox Arcana Pod, Facebook at Vox Arcana Podcast, and Instagram at Vox Arcana Podcast. If you want to read some of my thoughts, you can find my blog at voxarcana.org. Email your questions to us at voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. The first to create a Wikipedia page for this podcast wins the prize.